Apparently, saving money is now considered a personal attack, especially if your mom finds out about it. This is the story of a 19-year-old college student whose biggest financial threat wasn't student loans. It was her own mother. And yes, it gets worse. So this girl was responsible, almost suspiciously responsible for someone her age. She worked part-time while studying, skipped expensive trips, avoided impulse buys, and didn't treat her debit card like it was a toy. While her friends were spending money like Monopoly cash, she was quietly building something most people her age don't have: savings. By 19, she had built up a pretty solid amount, not buy a yacht money, but impressive for someone balancing school and work. Then one afternoon, her mom casually asked about her job. "How much are you making now?" Normal question, nothing strange. Then came the follow-up. "How much have you saved?" And because she's honest, she answered. That's when the atmosphere shifted. You know that moment when someone hears a number and suddenly starts doing math in their head? That look? Yeah, that one. Her mom went from proud parent to financial strategist in about 3 seconds. She started talking about family expenses, bills, repairs, general needs, which, to be fair, every household has. But then came the sentence that changed everything. "You should give us your savings. Not borrow, not help a little, give, all of it, just like that." And when she hesitated, the guilt parade arrived on schedule. "We raised you. We sacrificed for you. You owe us." Apparently, parenting now comes with an invoice. She tried to explain that she was saving for her future, emergencies, independence, maybe even moving out someday. But somehow that translated into selfish. She was called ungrateful, cold, self-centered. Because obviously, working hard and saving money is now morally questionable behavior. Then things escalated, extended family got involved, aunts, cousins, random relatives who hadn't texted her in months suddenly had strong opinions about her bank account. "Why won't you help your mom?" Funny how none of them volunteered their own savings. Then came the suggestion that really crossed the line. Her mom asked for access to her bank account. For transparency. Sure, because nothing says healthy boundaries like shared financial control. That's when she realized something important. This wasn't about helping the family. This was about control. If she handed over her savings once, it wouldn't stop there. It would set a precedent. So she did something radical. She opened a new bank account, transferred her money, changed her passwords, and stopped discussing her finances completely. Revolutionary concept, boundaries. Did she feel guilty? Of course, emotional pressure is designed to make you feel guilty. That's how it works. But she also knew something deeper. She worked for that money. She sacrificed for it. She earned it. And protecting your future doesn't make you selfish. It makes you responsible. Her mom didn't take it well. The relationship became tense. Conversations turned cold. Subtle comments were thrown around during dinner. But the money stayed where it belonged, in her account. And here's the real question. Is it selfish to protect your financial future? Or is it selfish to demand someone else's savings because you think you're entitled to it? Let me know what you think. Because apparently, being financially responsible is controversial now. Apparently, saving money is now considered an act of betrayal. At least that's what I learned the day my own mother discovered how much I had in my bank account. And somehow, I became the villain. Let me explain. I'm 19. I go to college. I work part-time. I don't party every weekend. I don't buy expensive clothes. I don't treat Amazon like it's a personality trait. Instead, I did something wild. I saved money, not because I'm greedy, not because I don't love my family, but because I grew up watching financial stress destroy peace in our house. Late-night arguments about bills, whispers about debt, that tension you can feel even as a kid. So I promised myself I wouldn't live like that. By the time I turned 19, I had built up a pretty decent amount in savings. Nothing insane, but enough that I felt safe. And that's when the trouble started. It was a normal afternoon. My mom asked about my job. "How's work going?" "Good." "How much are you making now?" I told her. Then she smiled. "That's great. I'm proud of you." "See? Harmless." Then came the second question. "How much have you saved?" Now I hesitated, but I've always been honest with my mom. So I told her, and I watched something change in her face. It was subtle, but real. She repeated the number slowly, like she was tasting it. Then she got very quiet. That night at dinner, she brought it up again. We've been struggling with some expenses. Okay, fair. Every family has bills. But then she said it. You should give us your savings. I thought she meant help out a little. Nope. All of it. She said it casually, like she was asking to borrow a phone charger. I laughed, because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. You live under this roof. We raised you. We sacrificed everything. Ah, yes, the classic parenting invoice. Apparently, there's a repayment plan I never agreed to. I tried to explain. I worked for that money. I'm saving for emergencies, for moving out, for the future. And suddenly, I wasn't the responsible daughter anymore. I was selfish, ungrateful, cold. Because obviously, financial independence equals emotional betrayal. The conversation escalated fast. She said if the family is struggling, my savings shouldn't just sit there. I asked what exactly the emergency was. Silence, then vague answers. Things. Expenses. You wouldn't understand. Interesting. The next day, my aunt texted me, then my cousin. Apparently, my bank account had become community property. Why are you refusing to help your mom? Funny how none of them offered their own savings. Just mine. Then came the real shock. My mom asked for access to my account. For transparency. Sure, because nothing says trust like demanding someone's login credentials. That's when I realized this wasn't about help. It was about control. If I handed it over once, it would never stop. Every paycheck, every raise, every bonus, it would become family money. And here's the thing. We weren't starving. We weren't losing the house. There was no eviction notice. There was no medical crisis. There was just the idea that my money was available. And once people think your money is available, boundaries become optional. So I did something quiet. I opened a new bank account, transferred my savings, changed every password. And I stopped discussing money entirely. When my mom found out I wasn't transferring the money, she was furious. She accused me of thinking I was better than everyone. She said I was choosing money over family. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If protecting your future feels like betrayal to someone, maybe they never wanted your future to begin with. The house got tense, conversations became short. Passive-aggressive comments appeared out of nowhere. Oh, must be nice to have savings. Yes, it is. Highly recommend. I started planning my move out. Because financial independence means nothing if you're emotionally trapped. And yes, I felt guilty. That's what guilt tactics are designed to do. They make you question your boundaries. But guilt doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means someone is uncomfortable with your limits. Eventually, things calmed down, not because she agreed with me, but because she realized I wasn't backing down. And here's what I learned from all of this. Sometimes the people who shout, "Family comes first," actually mean, "My comfort comes first." Saving money isn't selfish. Demanding someone else's savings might be. So now I'm asking you, if your parent demanded your entire savings, would you hand it over, or would you protect your future? Let me know. Because apparently, responsibility is controversial now. You ever check your bank account and realize your biggest financial threat isn't inflation? It's your own sibling? Because that's how my week started. One normal Tuesday morning. Coffee in hand, peaceful, responsible, adulting. And then I opened my banking app. And suddenly, I was funding someone else's lifestyle. Not a hacker, not a scammer in another country. My sister. And somehow, I was the bad guy. Let me explain. I'm 24, I work full-time, I'm not rich, I'm not flashy. I just like knowing my rent will clear and my credit score isn't screaming for help. My sister, she lives in what I call financial optimism, which is a polite way of saying she believes money will appear if she manifests it hard enough. She's 27, between jobs, again, always working on something big. A business idea, a content plan, a rebrand, a glow-up, income, unclear. Now here's an important detail. A few months ago, she stayed at my apartment for a week. She said she needed space. I said yes. Family. During that week, I left my wallet on the kitchen counter a few times because I trusted her. Mistake number 1, fast forward to that Tuesday. $327 at a clothing store. Okay, $189 online. Weird. $742 for an airline ticket. Excuse me? Then restaurants, beauty salons, ride shares. Total? Over $2,400. In 5 days. That's not an accident. That's a vacation package. I called the bank immediately. Did you authorize these purchases? No. Has anyone had access to your card? And that's when my stomach dropped. The bank told me the purchases were made through Apple Pay, registered to a device that was not mine. But I've seen that device before. It lives in my sister's hand. So I drove to my parents' house. She was there, on the couch, relaxed, scrolling. Probably shopping, I asked calmly. Did you use my credit card? She didn't panic. She didn't deny it. Oh yeah, I was going to tell you. Going to tell me. When? After my credit score wrote a suicide note. I asked why. She said she needed it. Needed it. For what? Apparently, important things. Important things included new clothes, a weekend trip, beauty appointments, and a flight to visit a friend. I blinked. Why didn't you ask me? She shrugged. You would have said no. Correct. That is, in fact, how consent works. I told her she needed to pay it back immediately. She laughed. Actually laughed. Then she said something that deserves its own documentary. You owe me. I owe you? She explained that because I have a stable job and she helped me emotionally growing up, I now owe her support. The logic was breathtaking. By that logic, I should invoice her for childhood snacks. Then my mom joined, and within seconds, I became the villain. She's struggling. She didn't mean harm. You're overreacting. Overreacting? To $2,400 disappearing? Interesting threshold. I asked what the emergency was. Silence. No eviction, no medical bills, no crisis, just entitlement. Then things escalated. My sister said families don't nickel and dime each other, which is funny because she was very precise with my credit limit, so I canceled the card immediately. Filed a fraud report. Yes, against my own sister. And that's when the explosion happened. She showed up at my apartment furious. You reported me? Correction. I reported the charges. If they trace back to you, that's just math. She accused me of betraying her, which is bold, considering she betrayed my credit first. Then she tried a new tactic, gaslighting. You said I could use it. No. You always help me. Not like this. You're dramatic. Yes, I'm dramatic about not wanting financial ruin. Then she escalated again. If you don't cancel the report, I'll tell everyone what you did. Blackmail. Apparently, we upgraded the drama package. I asked calmly, what exactly did I do? She mumbled something about old arguments and private conversations, which translates to, she had nothing. Then my mom called. She said the fraud investigation could ruin your sister's future. Interesting. Using my card didn't seem to concern her about mine. Then came the second shock, a notification from my credit monitoring app, a credit inquiry, under my name. At a financing company, I didn't apply for anything. Guess who had my information? Guess who had already shown she doesn't respect boundaries? I called the company immediately. Someone had attempted to open a line of credit in my name. Application denied, because my credit was frozen. That's when it stopped being sibling drama and became identity fraud. I confronted her again. No sarcasm this time, just facts. If this continues, I won't be able to stop the investigation. Suddenly, she found money. Isn't that amazing? Within 2 weeks, she transferred $1,500. Not all of it, but enough to show she could pay when consequences existed. Still, she insisted she planned to repay it, eventually. Eventually is not a payment plan. The house became tense, family gatherings awkward. I became cold, unforgiving, money-obsessed. Meanwhile, the person who committed fraud, still invited to dinner, still protected, still misunderstood. That's when I learned something uncomfortable. In some families, accountability depends on who you are. If you're responsible, you're expected to absorb chaos. If you're reckless, you're protected from consequences. I changed everything after that. Passwords, accounts, locks. I stopped discussing my salary, stopped sharing details, stopped being financially transparent, because transparency only works when trust exists, and trust was gone. Months later, she told relatives, "I care more about money than family," which is ironic because the only reason we're here is because she cared about my money. Here's the truth. If I didn't freeze that card, this wouldn't have stopped. It would have grown. A new charge, a new excuse, a new emotional speech. Entitlement expands when it's rewarded, and boundaries feel like betrayal to people who benefit from you having none. So now I'll ask you, if your sibling used your credit card, opened accounts in your name, and blamed you for defending yourself, would you protect them or protect your future? Because sometimes the hardest lesson isn't losing money. It's realizing who you can't trust anymore. Let me know what you would have done. My sister asked my mom for money again, a large amount for a business opportunity. And this time, my mom called me first, not to blame me, to ask advice. That was new. She said she was scared. She admitted the loan payments were heavy. She admitted she felt manipulated. And that's when I realized something. The system wasn't collapsing because I reported fraud. It was collapsing because reality was catching up. I told my mom something I wish someone told her years ago. Helping her isn't the same as protecting her from consequences. Long silence. Then she whispered, "I know." And that was the first crack in the wall. But cracks don't mean collapse, because here's the cliffhanger. A week later, I got a call from a collections agency. Not about me, about my mom. Her loan payments were late, and guess who hadn't contributed anything toward them? Exactly. Episode 3 isn't about winning. It's about watching a system unravel. Because sometimes the villain isn't the loudest person in the room, it's the pattern nobody wants to confront. Now I need to ask you something. If enforcing boundaries makes you the villain in the short term, but saves your family in the long term, would you still do it? Drop your opinion in the comments. And if you want to see what happens next, when the bank calls again and the entire financial mess explodes, make sure you subscribe. Because episode 4 is where everything changes. Trust me, you don't want to miss what she does next. So now I need to ask you something. If enforcing boundaries makes you the villain in the short term, but protects your future in the long term, would you still do it? Because in episode 4, things don't calm down. They escalate. The bank calls again. My mom starts seeing the consequences in real time. And my sister, she decides to flip the narrative completely. And what she does next almost destroys what's left of this family. If you want to see how this unfolds, make sure you subscribe right now, because this story isn't over. New episodes drop soon, and trust me, episode 4 changes everything. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. See you in the next episode. After I reported my sister, my mom turned on me. You ever realize you weren't fighting one person? You were fighting an entire system? Because that's what episode 3 felt like. After I reported my sister for using my credit card, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Because the real problem wasn't the fraud. It was the family that protected it. Let me take you back to the night everything shifted. After episode 2, after the fraud report, the frozen credit, the confrontation, the house went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, judgment quiet. The kind of silence that feels like you've already been convicted. My mom stopped calling. Group chat slowed down. My aunt sent me a message that just said, "Disappointed." Interesting. Disappointed in the thief? No, disappointed in me. Then one evening my mom called. "Come over, we need to talk." When a parent says that calmly, you know it's not calm. I drove over. My sister was already there. Of course she was. She looked composed, victim mode activated. My mom sat at the table like this was a formal hearing, and then she said it. "You embarrassed this family." Pause. I embarrassed the family, not the person who committed fraud. Me. Apparently, filing a report was taking it too far. Because in our family, we handle things privately. I asked a simple question. If a stranger did this to me, what would you tell me to do? Silence. Then my mom avoided eye contact. That's when she dropped the first real bomb. She said she had been helping my sister financially for years. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. Rent, car payments, credit card balances. And then she said something that explained everything. She's done this before. Done what before? Used someone else's credit card. My mom's. And every time, my mom paid it quietly. No police, no fraud report, no consequences. Just absorption. Suddenly, the pattern made sense. My sister didn't think what she did was catastrophic. She thought it was survivable, because historically, it always was. Then my mom admitted something else. She had taken out a personal loan recently to consolidate my sister's debt. I asked how much. She hesitated, then said it. $18,000. $18,000. My stomach dropped. Not because of the money alone, but because of what it represented. My mom wasn't just protecting her. She was drowning for her. And here's the hard truth. When you keep rescuing someone from consequences, you teach them that consequences aren't real. My sister sat there quietly, not ashamed, not apologetic, just watching the dynamic unfold, like she'd seen it before, because she had. My mom looked at me and said, "She's sensitive, she's struggling. You know how she is." Yes, I do know how she is. That's the problem. Then came the real pressure. My mom asked me to withdraw the fraud investigation entirely, to officially close it, to protect your sister's future. Interesting phrase, protect her future. What about mine? What about my credit? What about the attempted credit line in my name? That's when my sister finally spoke. "If you don't drop it, I'm done with you." There it was. Emotional blackmail, but layered, because she added, "And when I move out, don't expect me to come back." My mom's eyes flicked to me, like the responsibility was mine, as if I was the detonator, as if the fraud didn't already happen. I asked my sister one question. If I hadn't caught it, would you have stopped? She didn't answer. And sometimes silence is the loudest confession. But here's where it gets worse. My mom revealed she had co-signed a refinance for my sister's car, meaning if my sister defaulted, my mom was legally on the hook. The $18,000 wasn't the bottom. It was just a layer. And suddenly I understood something painful. This wasn't just sibling chaos. This was generational enabling. My mom wasn't defending my sister because she thought she was right. She was defending her because she was financially entangled. Admitting my sister was reckless would mean admitting she enabled it. And that's hard, so instead, I was the villain, because villains are easier than accountability. That night I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I said something simple. I'm not the reason she's in trouble, her behavior is. And for a moment, my mom looked tired, not angry, tired. Like she knew, but didn't know how to undo years of patterns. I didn't escalate the investigation, but I didn't withdraw it either. I left it active, a boundary, a message. Cross this line again and I won't hesitate. The weeks after that were strange. Family gatherings were awkward. I was labeled cold. Money obsessed. Unforgiving. Meanwhile, the person who actually committed fraud, still invited, still protected, still misunderstood. But here's the shift. 3 months later, my sister told everyone I was the villain. Have you ever tried to protect yourself and somehow ended up being the bad guy? Because that's exactly what happened next. After I refused to drop the fraud report, my sister didn't escalate legally. She escalated socially, and honestly, That hurt more. It started quietly. An Instagram story. A vague post. No one talks about how painful betrayal from your own family feels. No names, but everyone knew. Then came the DMs. My cousin asked, "What happened? Why is she saying you're threatening her?" Threatening her. Interesting rewrite. By the end of the week, the story had evolved. According to her, I didn't report fraud. I tried to ruin her life. I didn't protect my credit. I chose money over family. And my personal favorite. I've always been jealous of her. Jealous? Of what exactly? The $18,000 debt? The pattern of manipulation? But narratives don't need logic. They need emotion, and she knew how to sell emotion. She cried in front of relatives. She told them she was mentally struggling. She said the police report gave her panic attacks. And the worst part? My mom didn't correct it. She didn't defend me. She stayed quiet, and silence can look like agreement. At the next family dinner, the air felt different. My aunt barely looked at me. My uncle made a comment about legal threats tearing families apart. Legal threats? I reported fraud. But in the retelling, I became aggressive, cold, transactional. My sister sat at the table like a wounded angel. Soft voice, tearful eyes, perfect timing. When someone asked, "Did he really call the bank on you?" she nodded slowly, as if I had betrayed a sacred oath. No one asked what she did first, because she controlled the narrative early. And here's something I learned. The first version of a story people hear usually sticks, even if it's incomplete. I tried to defend myself, but every time I explained, it sounded defensive. Because I was defending, which somehow made me look guilty. That week, something else happened. A relative removed me from a family group chat. No explanation, just gone. And that hit harder than I expected. Because now it wasn't just tension, it was social exile. My sister had weaponized sympathy, and I underestimated how powerful that is. Then came the public post. She didn't name me, but she wrote, "Some people think money matters more than blood. I hope they can live with that." Hundreds of comments, support. "He's toxic. You deserve better. Cut him off." I stared at my screen. It was surreal, because I knew the truth. But the truth wasn't viral. Her version was. That night, my mom called. Not to apologize, not to clarify, to ask me to stop responding. She said I was making things worse, by telling the truth. I asked her directly, "Do you believe I was wrong?" Long pause, then she said something that shattered me. "I believe you could have handled it differently." Different how? Let it slide? Pay her debt quietly? Protect the image? That's when I realized this wasn't about right or wrong. It was about comfort. I made everyone uncomfortable because I introduced consequences, and consequences expose patterns. But here's the twist. 2 weeks later, one of my cousins messaged me privately. She said, "I think she did this to me too. Different card, smaller amount, but same behavior." Suddenly, the story wasn't isolated, it was repeating. And guess what? My sister had told her the same thing she told everyone else about me, that she was misunderstood, that she forgot, that it was temporary. Pattern confirmed. I didn't post it publicly. I didn't screenshot it. I kept it quiet. Because this wasn't about revenge, it was about boundaries, but karma has timing. A few days later, my mom called again. This time she sounded different, panicked. She said the bank contacted her about a missed loan payment. And when she asked my sister about contributing, my sister exploded, said it wasn't her responsibility, said my mom offered to help. Offered. Interesting word, because manipulation often feels voluntary. That was the moment my mom's voice cracked, not at me, at reality. The version she protected was starting to collapse, and suddenly, I wasn't the villain anymore. I was the warning she ignored. But here's where it gets worse. My sister found out my cousin contacted me, and she accused me of turning the family against her. The irony was overwhelming. She built a narrative. But the second facts entered the room. I became manipulative. Projection is powerful. That night I made a decision. I stopped defending myself publicly. I stopped explaining. I stopped engaging. Because sometimes the strongest move is silence backed by documentation. And I kept every record, every statement, every inquiry, every message, not to destroy her, but to protect myself. And now I need to ask you something. If someone lies about you publicly, do you fight back loudly? Or do you wait for the truth to surface on its own? Because in episode 5, the financial pressure explodes. The bank doesn't just call my mom, they escalate. And this time, it's not just reputation on the line, it's assets. If you want to see how deep this actually goes, make sure you subscribe right now. Turn on notifications, because what happens next doesn't stay online. It becomes legal, and when money, pride, and denial collide, families don't just argue, they fracture. And here's the part nobody talks about. When someone rewrites the story about you, you don't just lose reputation, you lose relationships, you lose invitations, you lose conversations that never happen again. And the worst part? You start questioning yourself. Not because you're wrong, but because isolation is loud. There were nights I replayed everything. Should I have just let it go? Should I have paid it quietly? Should I have protected the illusion instead of the truth? But every time I opened my bank app, every time I looked at the attempted credit inquiry, every time I remembered the silence when I asked, would she have stopped? I knew. This wasn't about pride, it was about patterns. And patterns don't fix themselves, they escalate. Which brings us to what happened next, because when the bank called my mom again, it wasn't just a reminder, it was a warning. And this time it wasn't about a few $1,000s, it was about something much bigger: assets, legal liability, and a deadline. In episode 5, the financial pressure explodes. And when money runs out, so do excuses. If you think this is just family drama, you haven't seen what happens when debt meets denial. Subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next, because episode 5 is where everything stops being emotional and starts becoming legal. See you in the next episode. The bank gave a final deadline, 7 days. 7 days before escalation, 7 days before permanent damage. And in those 7 days, my sister did nothing. No payment, no plan, no remorse. You know that feeling when you think things can't get worse? And then the phone rings. That's what happened next. After my sister turned the family against me, after I became the villain in everyone's story, the bank called again. But this time, it wasn't just a reminder. It was a warning. I was at work when my mom texted, "Call me, it's urgent." I knew that tone. When I called her back, she didn't sound angry. She sounded scared. The bank had escalated the missed payment. The $18,000 loan wasn't just late anymore. It was officially in default. And once something hits default, the clock starts ticking. I asked her the one question she avoided for weeks. Did she make any payments? Silence, then she said. She said she would. Would. Future tense. The most dangerous tense in a financial agreement. Apparently, my sister had promised to handle it. But instead of paying, she had been telling everyone how unfair I was. So while she was protecting her image, interest was stacking, penalties were stacking, risk was stacking. The bank told my mom if the payment wasn't resolved soon, they would begin collection procedures. Not just calls, not just letters, formal action. And here's where it got real. My mom had co-signed, which meant the debt wasn't just my sister's problem. It was legally hers too. For the first time, my mom realized something terrifying. This wasn't about pride anymore, it was about liability. She called my sister that night. I wasn't there, but I heard about it later. Apparently, my sister said something that finally cracked the illusion. She said, "Well, you offered to help. It's not my fault." That sentence changed everything, because helping is voluntary, but responsibility isn't. My mom finally asked her, "Are you planning to pay this?" And instead of saying yes, My sister said, "Why is this all about money with you?" Deflection. Classic. When facts corner someone, they attack the emotion instead. A week later, the bank called again. This time they weren't polite. They mentioned collections, credit impact, legal review. That's when my mom called me again. And for the first time since this started, she didn't sound defensive. She sounded small. She asked me, "What would you do?" Not as an accusation, as advice. I told her the truth. You need to stop protecting her. Because every time she protected her, she transferred the damage to herself and to me. Meanwhile, my sister was still posting online, still playing the victim, still telling people how heartless I was. But something had shifted, because fear changes tone. And now my mom wasn't worried about appearances. She was worried about numbers. Then came the letter, certified mail, formal notice of default, 30 days. 30 days before escalation. 30 days before possible legal action. 30 days before long-term credit damage. And guess what? My sister didn't open it. She left it on the kitchen counter, like ignoring paper could erase ink. That night, my mom cried. Not because of me, not because of arguments, but because reality doesn't care about narratives. Reality cares about payment schedules. I asked her something hard. If I hadn't reported her, would this still be happening? She didn't answer, because she knew. Yes, it would. It just would have been delayed. But here's the twist. My sister still didn't take responsibility. Instead, she said, "You're all overreacting. Overreacting to legal default. Overreacting to collections. Overreacting to consequences." That's when I understood something clearly. This wasn't immaturity. It was entitlement. And then something happened that none of us expected. The bank requested documentation, income proof, asset information. If they moved forward, this could impact more than just credit. It could affect refinancing, insurance rates, future loans, everything. Suddenly, this wasn't just drama. It was systemic damage. My mom finally saw what I saw weeks ago, that protecting someone from consequences doesn't remove the consequences, it just moves them. And here's the part nobody was ready for. My sister started blaming my mom, saying, "If you hadn't co-signed, this wouldn't be your problem." Which is technically true, but morally empty. That night, my mom asked her to move out. Not in anger, in exhaustion. And my sister said something chilling. "You'll regret this." Not apology, not accountability, a threat. Now, the family wasn't just divided, it was unstable. And I realized something. When money collapses, so do masks. For the first time, my mom didn't defend her. She stopped answering relatives. She stopped explaining. She stopped trying to control the narrative, because the numbers were louder than the gossip. And now I need to ask you something. If someone keeps choosing pride over responsibility, at what point do you stop saving them? Because in episode 6, the illusion finally breaks. And when it does, it doesn't end quietly. If you want to see what happens next, subscribe right now. Turn on notifications, because episode 6 is where denial ends and consequences begin. See you in the next episode. And here's the part nobody warned us about. Debt doesn't just affect your credit. It changes how people look at each other. It changes trust. It changes power. For weeks, my sister controlled the narrative. She controlled the emotions. She controlled the sympathy. But she couldn't control the numbers. And numbers don't care who cries louder. They just keep counting. 7 days. That was the deadline. 7 days before this stopped being family drama and started becoming legal damage. I watched my mom shift, not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly. The defense was gone. The excuses were thinner. The fear was real. Because this wasn't about pride anymore, it was about survival. And here's what I realized. When someone refuses responsibility long enough, eventually responsibility finds them anyway, just not gently. So now I'll ask you something. If someone keeps choosing pride over accountability, how long do you keep saving them? At what point does helping become enabling? Because in episode 6, the illusion finally breaks, and when it does, It doesn't happen in private. It happens in a way none of us expected. If you want to see how this escalates, subscribe now. Turn on notifications, because what happens next isn't emotional, it's irreversible. See you in episode 6. The truth came out, and it was worse than I thought. You know what's terrifying? It's not the debt. It's the moment you realize the person you're dealing with was never confused. They were calculated. Because in episode 6, we didn't just discover she wasn't paying, we discovered she never planned to. After the final bank deadline, my mom stopped trying to keep peace. She stopped making calls to talk. She stopped asking gently, and for the first time, she said one sentence that changed the energy in the house. Show me everything. Everything. Every email, every statement, every document, every message. Because the only thing stronger than denial is paperwork. That night, we spread everything across the table. Loan letters, bank notices, call logs, screenshots. And when you look at it all together, it doesn't look like a mistake. It looks like a system built on avoidance, manipulation, and someone else cleaning up the mess. My sister walked in, saw the table, and froze. Not confused, not surprised, just annoyed, like we had interrupted her. My mom asked, calm but firm, "Where did the money go?" My sister did what she always did. She sighed, rolled her eyes, and said, "Why are you interrogating me?" Interrogating, as if accountability is abuse. My mom didn't flinch. "Answer the question." My sister laughed, actually laughed. Then she said, "It's not that deep." Not that deep. While collectors were literally escalating. That's when my mom slid a document across the table, a credit inquiry, dated after I reported her. Meaning, she tried again. Not on my card, on something else. And she didn't even deny it. She said, "I was trying to fix things. Fix things. By opening more credit." That's when the truth finally started bleeding through. The reveal, midsection. My mom kept digging, and this part still shocks me, because buried in the paperwork was a second loan inquiry. Not approved, but attempted, in my mom's name. My mom stared at it, like her brain couldn't process the betrayal. Then she whispered, "Did you use my information?" My sister went quiet, a full 5 seconds. Then she said, "I didn't use it. I just had it." Had it. Like that was normal. Like that didn't change everything. I watched my mom's face change in real time. Not anger first. Hurt, then fear. Then something heavier than both. Reality. My mom asked her again, "Did you ever intend to pay this loan?" My sister didn't answer. She tried to redirect. "You're acting like I'm a criminal," my mom said. "No, I'm acting like I'm responsible." That line hit me, because it was the first time my mom chose responsibility over comfort. My sister didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She didn't even pretend. Instead, she attacked. She said my mom was dramatic. She said I was poisoning the family. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "If you guys don't help me, then don't call yourselves family." That's the core of manipulation. Love as leverage. Family as a hostage negotiation. My mom stood up, hands shaking, voice steady, and she said, "I love you, but I won't finance your destruction." Finance your destruction. That was it. The truth sentence. The boundary sentence. And boundaries feel like betrayal to people who benefit from you having none. My sister snapped. She grabbed her bag, and before leaving, she said, "You'll regret choosing him." Choosing him. She still framed it as a loyalty war, not a reality check. That night, my mom didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table in silence, staring at the final notice like it was a mirror. And quietly she said, I created this. That sentence hurt, because she wasn't blaming herself for the debt. She was blaming herself for enabling it. And here's the lesson that matters. Some people don't change when you explain. They change when the system stops supporting them. Because enabling isn't love, it's a delay on consequences. And when consequences finally arrive, they arrive with interest. 2 days later, the bank called again. But this time, the call wasn't just about payment. They said, "We need to verify identity due to suspicious activity." Suspicious activity. That means flags. That means internal review. That means the word nobody wants. Fraud. My mom looked at me and said, "Is this what you felt?" Yes, exactly, that pit in your stomach, because suddenly it's not a family problem, it's a legal problem. My mom asked me something I'll never forget. "If I report her, am I destroying her life?" I said, "No, you're stopping her from destroying yours." My mom picked up the phone. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She spoke clearly, and she asked the bank for the fraud department. I watched her, and I realized this wasn't revenge. This was survival. And that's where episode 6 ends, because in episode 7, the final episode, the fallout is immediate. Family members pick sides. The truth spreads. And my sister makes one last move that none of us saw coming. If you want to see how this ends, subscribe now. Turn on notifications. Because episode 7 isn't just emotional, it's the conclusion. And it's the only way this story can end, with a boundary. See you in the final episode. There's something nobody talks about when it comes to family loyalty. We're taught that protecting family is noble, that standing by blood is unconditional, but nobody teaches you the difference between loyalty and liability. That night, after my sister left, my mom didn't just sit in silence. She started remembering. Little things, moments that felt small at the time. The first time my sister borrowed money and didn't return it. The time she lied about a late bill, the excuses, the dramatic tears, the way every situation somehow turned into someone else's fault. And my mom said something that hit harder than anything else. I always thought she would grow out of it. That's how enabling survives. On hope. Hope that maturity will magically appear. Hope that consequences won't be necessary. Hope that love is enough, but hope without accountability becomes permission. I realized something uncomfortable too. I had been angry at my sister, but part of me was angry at my mom. Because every time she cleaned up the mess, she silently told my sister, "There's no real cost." And when there's no cost, behavior doesn't change. It evolves, it escalates, it gets smarter, more strategic, less emotional, more calculated. The hardest truth in all of this wasn't about money, it was about identity. My sister didn't see herself as irresponsible, she saw herself as misunderstood. She didn't think she was manipulating. She thought she was surviving. That's the danger. When someone believes their own narrative, they stop seeing harm. And when harm is invisible, it spreads. My mom asked me, "When did this stop being a mistake?" And I told her the truth. It stopped being a mistake the second she tried again. Because mistakes feel chaotic, patterns feel intentional, and once you recognize a pattern, you can't unsee it. For the first time, my mom stopped asking, "How do we protect her?" and started asking, "How do we protect ourselves?" That shift changes everything, because boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They separate responsibility from emotion. They protect stability. They protect dignity. They protect future damage. And here's something most people won't admit. When you finally stop enabling someone, you feel guilty. Even when you're right, even when it's necessary, even when it's overdue. Because walking away from chaos feels cruel, until you realize staying would have been self-destruction. That night, my mom said, "If I call the fraud department, I lose my daughter." And I said, "No, you lose the illusion." Because the daughter she thought she had wouldn't have done this. And facing that truth hurts more than any debt. When the consequences finally arrived, there's a moment in every family conflict where the arguing stops, not because someone won, but because reality stepped in. And when reality steps in, it doesn't care about feelings. After my mom made the call to the fraud department, everything changed, not instantly, but permanently. 2 days later, the bank contacted her again. This time, the tone was different. Professional, measured, serious. They confirmed something we already suspected. There had been unauthorized attempts to access credit information. They didn't accuse, they didn't dramatize, they just said, "This will be formally reviewed." And when something is formally reviewed, it becomes documented. When it's documented and it becomes real, my sister didn't expect that. She thought this was another emotional storm, another moment we'd eventually smooth over, another mess someone else would absorb. But this time, there was paperwork, and paperwork doesn't argue. The fallout. When she found out the bank had opened a review, she exploded. She didn't call my mom first. She called extended family. She told them we had ruined her life. She said we reported her. She framed it like betrayal. And for a few days, the family was divided. Some relatives called us cold. Some said, "You should have handled it privately." But here's the uncomfortable truth. It was handled privately, for years, and private protection is what allowed it to grow. The conversation that mattered. 3 days later, my sister came over. Not screaming, not dramatic, just quiet. And for the first time, she didn't blame anyone. She asked one question. Was it really that serious? My mom looked at her and calmly said, "Yes." No speech, no anger, just yes. Because seriousness isn't about how loud a situation feels, it's about the consequences it carries. My sister sat down, and something shifted. Not magically, not dramatically, but slightly. For the first time, she asked what would happen next. And that's when my mom said something powerful. "We're not fixing this for you. We're supporting you while you fix it." That sentence is the difference between enabling and parenting. The legal reality. The bank didn't file charges. There wasn't a police scene, there wasn't a courtroom moment, but there was a permanent record, credit flags, internal documentation, monitoring, and that alone was enough to shake her. Because consequences don't need sirens. Sometimes they just need permanence. The real ending. Over the next month, my sister had to contact the bank herself. She had to speak to agents, she had to explain. She had to set up structured repayment. For the first time, she was the one on hold. She was the one negotiating. She was the one facing discomfort. And that discomfort, that's where growth begins. My mom didn't celebrate. She didn't feel victorious. She felt sad. Because protecting someone from consequences feels loving, but watching them finally face consequences is necessary, and necessary doesn't always feel good. What I learned something uncomfortable. Boundaries don't destroy families, they reveal them. And if someone leaves when you set a boundary, they were benefiting from your lack of one. If someone stays and grows, they were capable all along. The final conversation. A month later, my sister said something unexpected. "I didn't think you'd actually let it go that far." And my mom responded, "I didn't think you'd let it go that far either." That's the truth. Nobody expects escalation. Until it escalates. We're not magically healed. We're not perfect. But the chaos stopped. Not because love increased, but because limits were enforced. And limits create safety. If you're dealing with someone who keeps saying, "It's not that serious," ask yourself this. If it wasn't serious, why are you the only one cleaning it up? Love without accountability becomes permission. Accountability without cruelty becomes growth. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop rescuing. Call to action, series closure. If you followed this entire series, you watched a family shift from denial to documentation, to decision, to consequence. If this story resonated with you, subscribe, because this channel isn't about exposing people. It's about exposing patterns and breaking them. More stories like this are coming. Real, uncomfortable, and honest. See you in the next series. There's one part of this story people don't usually talk about. What happens after the chaos ends? After the calls stop? After the documents are filed? After the shouting fades? There's a strange silence. And that silence is uncomfortable, because without the drama, you're left with reflection. For weeks after everything settled, the house felt different. Quieter, less tense, but also heavier. Not because we hated each other, but because we finally understood each other. My mom started saying something new. Instead of, "I hope she changes," she started saying, "I hope she learns." That shift matters. Hope for change is passive. Hope for learning assumes effort. And effort requires responsibility. My sister didn't transform overnight. She didn't suddenly become perfect. But she stopped asking to be rescued, and that alone was progress. Sometimes growth doesn't look dramatic. Sometimes it just looks like silence, like fewer excuses, like uncomfortable accountability, like someone sitting with consequences instead of running from them. I also had to confront something in myself. For months I was angry, and anger feels powerful. It feels justified. But eventually, you realize something. Boundaries don't need anger to survive. They need consistency. The moment I stopped trying to win the argument and started protecting my peace, everything shifted internally. I wasn't the villain, I wasn't the hero. I was just someone who chose stability. And here's the truth nobody likes. Some families don't fall apart because of betrayal. They fall apart because they refuse to address it. What saved ours wasn't punishment. It was accountability. Not perfect accountability. Not easy accountability. But real. If you're watching this and thinking about your own situation, ask yourself one honest question. Are you helping someone grow, or are you helping them avoid growth? Because those two things look similar at first, but long term, they lead to completely different outcomes. This series wasn't about exposing a person. It was about exposing a pattern, and patterns only break when someone decides to stop participating in them. That was the real ending. Not the bank, not the fraud review, not the confrontation. The real ending was a boundary that held, and peace that followed.